Amanda Lynne, formerly Amanda Drain. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. I decided to get you on as a guest on my show when I saw that interview you did on Mischief Night this past October with Laura Eisenhower. I was very impressed with what I heard, and I was even more impressed when I saw all the videos that you've uploaded to your channel over the course of however long that channel has been on. And like I said, I'll be using that as a guide throughout this interview, and probably your website, Incorporeal Healing, as well. So, but mostly the videos you've done, I've uploaded it by most popular to least popular, because I figure obviously the most popular subjects would be the most important, one would think. So with that being said, before we get into each subject, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are. For those of you that don't know about the whole Drain to Lynn thing, maybe cover that just briefly for a moment here, and then the rest of your life story. So you've got the floor. I will put myself on mute, and I promise not to interrupt you.
All right, so I guess where do I start? Yeah, my middle name's Lynn, so I decided I left a long-term relationship, and yeah, I'm using the middle name now. It's interesting. I recently found out that my mom actually named me Amanda Lynne after the instrument. So when she told me that story a couple months ago, I thought, okay, I got to go with Lynn here. Yeah, life story. Pretty normal-ish, I guess, despite, I had a lot of experiences as a child, a lot of encounters, and, just, I guess, typical, very introverted child, very, very shy and withdrawn. Kind of always knew that I was different and didn't really fit in with everybody. Yeah, I kind of struggled socially, even now, really. Got married very early at 17, and proceeded to have 5 children who are my absolute world, and will just do anything for them. Yeah, so around 2012, and that's a very significant date in a lot of Starseeds timelines, is kind of when things started to unravel for me. And, this life that I was trying to, have the perfect American dream type life, things just didn't fit right anymore, and things didn't sit well with me emotionally and mentally. I started really getting into, I hate saying conspiracy theories, but conspiracy facts. I started to read about pharmaceutical companies. That's kind of where I got started. I started as a personal trainer, sports nutritionalist, and the more I read, the more I realized that the whole health and medical field, pharmaceutical field, what we eat, that's really where it started. From all of those truths, I, of course, got into UFOs and secret space programs, and just really, I don't think there's a rabbit hole I haven't hopped through. Around 2014 was really when I started to get spiritually into it. Started with meditation and guided meditations. I started my energy healing course with Lee, who is just amazing. Anybody who is seeking out this type of certification, check her out. I couldn't say enough about her. She's amazing. So I started getting into this energy healing stuff, and the more I put my intentions into healing, and learning about this helped to heal me, and it helped to heal my traumas and to open me up to my own truths. And it was just a real long, I don't want to say real long, but it was a process. Around 2016, I started to see auras. I thought I was going crazy. I had terrible vertigo. I went and had some CAT scans done, MRIs done. Everything was fine. And I started to understand that, of course, connecting with my guides and higher self, that what I was seeing, in fact, was other people's energy fields, trees, plants, water. I could see energy fields around any sentient beings. And I started to realize that, this was more than just something I wanted to do. I wanted to heal and help people, but it was something more than that. Around 2018, August, the Lionsgate, August 8th, 2018, I went to Sedona. I was called to travel out there. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any real reason to go. It just, I felt drawn to be in Sedona. And there was a full moon, and I went out to Bell Rock, which it was just an incredible sky full of stars, and had a very emotional encounter with some friends, I'll say, there. And what I received, and I didn't know until a few months later, was I received a light language activation. And that started to unfold as well, because a lot of people, Starseeds, understand that we get these downloads and we're not sure. We've got this download, and there's a point at which, when you're receiving the download, everything makes sense and everything's clear. But then you've got to kind of come down to 3D again, and you've got to integrate everything. And then the things that were so clear a moment ago don't make sense, and you kind of have to put all of those things back together and look at the bigger picture. Yeah. So then I started around, let's see, probably November 2018. I was laying in bed, and I was in a very deep meditation. And I had my headphones in, listening to meditation through my earbuds. And I started to hear speaking. I started to hear words, and I didn't recognize the words, but I found that the vibration was in my throat. And then I realized, oh, this is coming from me. This is coming from my vocal cords. And, I took the earbuds out, and I was realizing that I was speaking this language. And quite honestly, I was freaked out. I didn't know what was happening. And, pulled the earbuds out, kind of talked myself down from it. And the next morning, kind of brushed it off as, well, maybe it was a dream. Maybe I was just in a deep meditation and it was a dream and I imagined it. But it continued, and I continued to hear this language in my head. Anywhere I went, it would just ramble in my head. And I started to understand that part of my mission was to not only draw and paint and scribe these symbols, but it was also to speak it. And the way the channel came up was, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be a female Eddie Vedder, basically. The only problem was I couldn't really sing, and I couldn't come up with lyrics. So, I was already playing guitar, and I thought, well, I'm writing these songs, but I can't put English words to them, and nothing. I would try so hard for hours, but it wouldn't come out to anything. I just end up getting frustrated and quitting. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm supposed to put the light language over the music. And I tried it, and it worked. And I got up the courage to post it. And that's what I've been doing. I've just been, yeah.
So that's where you want to stop. Okay, thank you. Thank you for keeping it short, sweet, and to the point. That's cool. Most people spend a lot more time on their life stories when I give them the chance to do it at the beginning of these shows. But
I
I
thought I
guess
was
we'll.
rambling.
No, no, I'm rambling at all. That was a nice little start there. And change of plans. I think I'd rather go through all the things at the top of the page on the incorporealhealing.com site, which is your site, and then I'll use your channel as a guide. Let's just go down the list, left to right, down to the bottom. StarSeed mission. Okay, are you calling yourself a starseed and your mission, or are you talking about the general missions of all the starseeds here on Earth, and whichever one it is? How do you identify a starseed, and how does a starseed figure out what their mission is, and how do they go about fulfilling that mission? Hope this isn't too broad a
Oh
question
boy,
for you.
that's like a 3-hour answer right there. Yeah, it's the article that I have on my website is very general, I guess. I would say anybody who thinks they may be a star seed is drawn to material about star seed, is drawn to other planets, is drawn to space in general. If you have a question, if you're, am I a star seed? Then you're probably a star seed, because people that aren't star seeds don't have that question in them. They don't have that trigger of, Now, how a starseed finds their mission is, it is completely an individual experience, and there's so many missions, and each starseed has so many missions. Can be very, very complex. So, and that's the biggest question I get is, okay, so I'm a starseed, I'm a light worker, what's my mission? And really, there's no way to be able to identify that in an individual. I mean, that is absolutely something for them to uncover.
Good answer. That's not a bad answer at all when it comes to expanding consciousness. People have to learn how to discover things for themselves and not rely on others to give them the answers. Great part of Ascension there. So moving on to next on the list, 12D Divine Golden Template. First of all, significance of 12D. Before I give you the chance to say what the significance of that is, I'm going to presume that's the highest dimension or density in your opinion. It's interesting I mentioned that because I just watched a video on the Portal to Ascension YouTube channel with some, I don't remember who the guy was, but he actually said that he hears people say 12D, referring to the dimensions and or densities, whichever term you want to use, but he said he doesn't agree with that. He thinks that they should be thought of as matrices and not dimensions or densities. And well, that's his take. I'll give you the chance to give your take on that. And also, the number 12, is that really the most accurate number? George Kavasilis, when I interviewed him way back in the day, he said that he also goes by the 12D construct. And then when I told him, well, there's also a lot of people, for whatever the reason, that seem to be of a 22 dimensional construct. That seems to be another popular number when it comes to the number of dimensions and densities. And he told me that looking at his 12 dimensional construct, there is a part where he could see as 10 dimensions in one, which could cause someone to see that as 22 total dimensions, but he does not, because that's not his not his way of understanding it. And he also made it clear to me that you shouldn't categorize someone by their construct of the universe. And he gave the example, what I see as the fifth dimension is what someone else might see as the edge of the visible universe. And he did get into why that's the case. People are more than welcome to tune in to figure that out. But I've babbled long enough here. Why the number 12? What exactly does the D stand for? I presume it's either dimension or density. And well, then get into please what the divine golden template actually is.
Right. So, yeah, matrices, dimensions, densities, it's kind of all the same term for the same idea. And, you know, yes, different individuals will have different understandings of the numbers, and what I feel, see, and sense may not be what somebody else does, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's going to have their own perception of how it looks and how it feels. So there's no wrong answer here. And the 12D is 12 dimensions. Now, for me, what that means is not necessarily, because we have the Taurus field, we have the creation, the source field. Now, that can, or it's not necessarily the source field, but it is the field where that 12-dimensional DNA is going to be connected to source at the highest level, in my opinion. That's how I see it. And that represents, like I said, 12D DNA, which is, from my understanding, the most complete human template. And human, source, extraterrestrial, spirit, it is every dimension encompassed into one and none at the same time, which is very confusing.
Well, thank you. And the divine golden template, what exactly is? That's just another nickname for the 12 dimension layer construct that you see. That's the nothing, or is there a better definition for that phrase term?
Okay, so it's kind of, if you imagine, it's kind of like, I hate to say triangle, but it's kind of, if you can imagine a triangle, and the third dimension would be let's say 8 billion, we're almost up to 8 billion people. So that's 3D. As you go up in dimensions, those numbers become less. So I don't know the exact mathematics of it. Let's say 5D would be, I don't know, 300,000 or something. So do you see what I'm saying? As they come up, the souls get less and less fractured, or less and less fractaled, we'll say. So at the 12th dimensional level, you have basically source. You have source consciousness. You have the law of one. So like the raw material, that's going to be where all of those souls begin to fractal out. And when you activate the 12D DNA, you are lifting your consciousness to that tipping point, to that top point, to that node point.
Thank you for clarifying that. Gonna digress here from this list of things you have on your site for a moment. You mentioned we're almost at 8 billion here on Earth. Well, what exactly? I hear another number when it comes to population, and that number seems to be 144,000. I even remember you talking about what that is in your interview with Laura Eisenhower. It seems to be coming up all the time, and people seem to be confused about what exactly that number pertains to. I certainly I'm interested, considering that 1 is my lucky number par excellence, and 4 is my best number for premonitionary dreams, and also travel and finance. That's what I heard when I was had a reading on myself. So seeing a number like 144,000 having some significance, well, someone who 1 and 4 is lucky numbers, I need to kind of interested to know what this is all about, and why that number of all numbers, regarding the number of whatever it is. Please enlighten us.
Right. So very interesting. I didn't grow up as in a religious family, but we had a Bible, and I read it when I front to cover to cover when I was probably around 12 or 13. I read the entire thing. And the one verse, the 144 aren't mentioned a whole lot in the Bible, but when it was mentioned, my entire body tingled, my head buzzed. And I mean, I remember the day. I remember it was snowing outside, and it was a feeling of such strong resonance in my DNA that it's a moment I will never forget. Now, the Bible, the way it's written, it's the 12 tribes of Israel, it's not necessarily 144 individuals on earth. It refers to a frequency. It refers to we've heard of the term Christ consciousness. Well, this goes a little bit deeper than that. And it taps into that source consciousness, and it taps into the universal one. So it's a frequency, and the best way to reach that frequency is to connect with the earth grids, to connect with the 144 points of light that are node points on the earth grid, and meditating with that picture and that vision in your mind is the best way to open your heart space up to that frequency.
Thank you. Since you mentioned the Earth grid, another thing I want to digress on for just a moment here, because this is something I'm probably going to discuss often on this show for the next couple of years whenever someone mentions the grid or the ley line thing on the Earth. And it's just that I recently saw a video where Matheus De Stefano, brilliant indigo child from Argentina, very, very glad he's learned how to speak English, because only Spanish he did for a little while, and his information was so valuable. It was begging him to speak English, and he finally did. And in this video he talked about how up until the year 2022, 2 years from now approximately, there is going to be the pyramid structure of the Earth is going to be intermingling with the dodecahedron sacred geometry structure that surrounds the Earth, and this is going to, how should I put this, enable everybody on planet Earth to get along with each other better than they would if this grid was otherwise not forming. So people are going to get along better by 2022, all because of this grid structure that dodecahedron structure De Stefano refers to. And since you mentioned grid structure around the Earth, I can't help but ask: does what you just mentioned tie into what he's talking about, and do you actually see that happening? That this will enable people to get along better in a couple years?
Yes, absolutely. And the Earth grid, the 144 Earth dodecahedron is active. It is activated. It was activated in 2012. It's up and running. However, we still have the 3D matrix, or I hate to use the word cabal, but we still do have other systems in place that are not preventing, but slowing down those frequencies from actually being able to get to a lot of people that they need to get to. Now, certain things I see and feel and sense will happen sooner than later that will enable that particular system to come down completely. And there are places on Earth where it is down, and anybody who's been to Sedona or these other magical places knows that the feeling in these areas is, it doesn't feel like Earth anymore. And it literally isn't. It isn't the same in certain areas. So yes.
Thank you. Now, getting on the list here, there's a light language 101 thing. Well, first of all, what exactly are you referring to when you say light language? And I ask that because I recently heard from Daniel Teague of Vegas Star Healings. He Facebook messaged me this, but then he wanted to call me on the phone to talk about this in greater detail, where he discovered from his own spiritual work that light language is not what people are led to believe it is. He said it's actually misguided. And I asked him, well, wait a minute, just so you're not confusing anybody. Is this the kind of, are you talking about the light language that like an Akashic Records reader can access by looking at the Akashic Records, figuring out what light language is, and then speaking in that what sounds like an ET voice, like an ET with like some sort of an African accent? I, sorry if people find that a bad way of describing it, but anyhow, he explained to me, Daniel Teague, no, that's something completely different. That's a genuine access of a language that one can read in the Akashic Records. The light language that he says is fake, is not genuine, is something else when it comes to channels and entities claiming to be uh, relaying light language to someone, maybe I should encourage you to get a hold of Daniel Teague at VegasStarHealings.com to clarify this, because it was a complicated thing to explain, and I don't remember all the details of it myself. But when you're talking about light language, are you possibly concerned, now that I brought this to your attention, maybe you've been spreading information about a fraudulent language, or are you saying, no, this is the light language that he said is not a fraud? Any Akashic Records reader can access it by looking at the Akashic Records and then also using the Akashic Records to figure out how to speak it out of their own tongue.
Right. That's not been my experience. And his findings and connection with his guides that's the way he sees it, and that's fine. I know for me that, from what I've been told from my guides and my higher self and my connections, is that it is the language of DNA. And everybody's will sound different. Everybody's will have a different purpose. So it is an activation, because I'm speaking, and this goes for anybody who can tap into this, which is anybody who has the intention and wants to do this. They are speaking their DNA. They are connecting to themselves and their own soul's grid, we'll say, because everybody has their own Merkaba and light body. Now, individuals that can do this will not have the intention of, how do I want to put this? Because when you're tapping into this, only individuals with a pure heart and individuals that are really trying to help and heal and have those good intentions for the highest good of all, that's how they tap into it, is being able to have that type of frequency. It's the same thing as, let's say you're playing with a Ouija board and you've got somebody who, wants to, has the intention of wanting to talk to their loving grandmother, and then you've got somebody who wants to tap into, this house is haunted, let's talk to the scary ghost. Like, whatever your intention is and you're throwing it out into the universe, you're going to get that back. So having said that, though, in my experience, it is only individuals that have a pure intention that can connect with this sort of language. So that's just been my experience with this. I wouldn't do this if I thought it was going to hurt anyone or intentionally cause any problems. I'm doing this because I know I've seen it heal individuals that clients that I've had, and I've seen what it's done to me in my own body. So yeah.
Thank you for attempting to clarify that. A lot of confusion still on what light language is and is not. People are free to do their own research and learn their own languages. If just be careful with what you learn. Okay, but anyhow, beyond quantum hypnosis, I want to talk about that now. And the first thing that kind of jumps out at me about this, I can't help but wonder, would Dolores Cannon be spinning in her grave if she actually saw that beyond quantum hypnosis? I'm assuming this pertains to QHHT, and if Dolores Cannon saw that you put the word beyond or called something like ultra quantum hypnosis, she would be saying, oh, don't be ridiculous. The quantum hypnosis that I taught was definitely the most sophisticated anyone could get. So you're kind of throwing egg in my face, trying to assert that I didn't teach the best form of quantum hypnosis. But are you actually, by writing beyond quantum hypnosis here, are you actually saying that you've picked up where Dolores Cannon left off and can improve on her work tremendously?
Well, I think any healer has their own way of healing. Everybody has their own modality. And anybody who's drawn to this work now is coming up with their own take on things. And I think that's why we're here and we do this work. And that's part of the mission is, not to outdo anybody or it's just different. It's just a different experience. And, if somebody is drawn to Dolores Cannon, there's so many people out there that do this and do amazing jobs at it. So it's if you're drawn to it, then, I think there's a reason why people are drawn to certain types of modalities.
And for those that aren't familiar with what quantum hypnosis is, why don't you just give a quick take on a lesson of a quantum hypnosis 101 and specifically how your unique style works regarding it?
Yeah, well, normally it's when I became certified in the quantum healing, um, it's basically you read a script and you connect with the individual's heart space, and it's called mind and heart coherence. And you get them in a very meditative state, and they will start to have experiences, and they will some people are very vivid and very lucid and will give you lots and lots of details. I've had clients fall asleep and I'll still continue with the questions, and I'll still continue with the guided visual meditation, and they will share with me the experiences they've had. Or if an individual doesn't speak and perhaps falls asleep, we'll still finish up. We'll do they'll come to, we'll do the briefing. And even though they didn't speak or fell asleep, they will still convey what happened during their silence or during their dream time. And what happens is, in those experiences, their higher self or their guides or angels or whatever, whatever you want to call it, will lift up their consciousness out of the present state and put it into a state of consciousness where they can experience the most healing. Sometimes it's in a past life, future life, alternative life, parallel life. Sometimes I had a client who was a tiny sapling in the forest, and he described his roots. He described the way the rain fell on his leaves. People have described being on other planets and other beings. And then, people have just had experiences where they've been walking in the forest and a deer may come up to them or whatever. But, sometimes they don't seem very profound, the experiences, but later on, a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, they will have certain things will change, or they will feel shifts. The individual I was talking about, who was a sapling in the forest, gave me an update about a month later, and he said his lower back pain had disappeared. He had stopped taking his medication, and this, lower back pain had disappeared. So there's a lot of things that can happen after these types of healings.
Thank you. And there's also a lot of things that can happen after we undergo Ascension. And that's the next thing. What is Ascension? And so much does this word get thrown around. And getting back to George Kavassilis again, he has been really pushing what he calls the Ascension deception, which he acknowledged that he was guilty of with that whole thing about when he said that 2012, 21, 2012, up until the March equinox in 2013, in that time period, Earth was going to blossom into a five-dimensional entity, and we're all going to die, but it's going to be for the better because we'll be ascending into 5D. And well, that kind of description of what ascension would be like was one of many ascension deceptions that people are talking about. And since he was wrong about that, he really wants to get it out there to make sure other people don't make the same mistake that he did. And there are lots of people like Tolek, the Andromeda Council guy, January 2014, and even David Icke back in the late 90s, before he said 2012 was overblown, he was talking about the Earth would start rotating in the opposite direction in conjunction with the Mayan calendar ending and a consciousness shift at the same time. But that, of course, did not happen in that way. So, first of all, do you know anything about the Ascension deception, how to not suffer from it? And then after we cover that weak link, please talk about what Ascension actually is.
Yeah, well, anybody who puts a date and time on events is just setting themselves up for failure and ridicule, because it doesn't really happen like that. It doesn't happen on a mass scale like that, from my understanding, anyways. Ascension, I can understand. There was also the individual who, I forget which year it was, but it was, believe it was like September 23rd was the big year everything was going to end. And it never does. The world hasn't ended yet. The event, I guess, that has been talked about a lot lately that I've seen is, it's called the event, and it's the idea of the solar flash. Now, I actually witnessed, or I guess I should say, I had a vision of this event in the March equinox 2018. And what I believe is that we experience this event individually as well as collectively. But I don't, I think it's in groups of collectives, and I'm still unsure myself if it's actually going to be experienced by everyone at the same quote unquote time, because there is only one now. And as we're always shifting, is that event going to be felt in everyone's now? And I'm not quite sure. I'm not, honestly. I know that I experienced it with my own spirit. But yeah, I think at this point, with so many people talking about consciousness and everybody is awakening, and to put a time and date on Ascension is just it's just silly at this point. So, but yeah, Ascension to me is the idea of, we are infinite fractals of the one, and Ascension is just pulling those threads of consciousness back into one vessel, into one heart space. And then once you kind of realize what that process looks like, and you realize, well, we are all just one, it, it's very complex and convoluted, but also it's very simple, which again it's just very hard to explain. So, yeah.
Okay, it is hard to explain, so I don't blame you for ending your thing there with yeah, because people can make of it their own. And
Right. And that's kind of what Ascension is making it your own. Yeah, not really following. At a certain point, I think, as people are waking up, at least from what I experienced, I read 300 books in a year. I read everything. I was a sponge. And then I went online and I read everything. And I went to YouTube and I watched amazing channels like Bashar and, Abraham Hicks. And I listened to all these different channels. And I got to a point where I kind of felt like I had heard it all. And what I figured out, what I decided was that, okay, now I have little bits from everyone. David Wilcock, I've listened and read his whole archive of work. He's great. But I got to a point where I felt like I had heard enough from each category that it was time for me to follow my own guidance and follow my own soul, my own higher self, and connect with that own source consciousness. And I think that's what everybody kind of needs to do. They need to get to a point where they stop following everybody else and just go with what resonates with them.
Well, thank you. And one thing that is resonating with at least two people in the world today, and dare I say they give dates, but they did, and you say you shouldn't give dates. Well, these apparently one of these people didn't want to give a date, but he did anyway because, well, this is all what Spirit is pointing you to anyway. I'm talking about Brad Johnson, who channels Adronis, and I recently saw him live for the first time ever at the Codes of Awakening conference in Orlando, which I was at this past weekend, which was an astrology and numerology packed weekend of crazy things like the eclipse, the 111 thing, and Uranus going forward, and the Saturn conjunct Pluto. It was a crazy weekend, and it was a great conference too. And in that conference, he pushed the thing that he's been pushing for maybe a little less than a year now about 2037 being the 3 days of darkness consciousness shift period. And he says, while he's not the only one, some guy who studies the pyramid code, dealing with pyramid inches and figuring out some sort of a timeline based on this pyramid code. 2037 is the year that it's that the pyramid code thing points to, and he said, I'm sorry if I'm pissing you people off by giving this date, but this is what Spirit is telling me, even though I know that giving dates usually results in egg in your face. The fact that Spirit's giving me this, it says that I might as well be giving it too, but at least I have a little bit of safety net with the pyramid inch guy. And it's interesting how he says 2037. That would be about a year after the asteroid Apophis would hit the Earth if it goes to that gravitational keyhole on Friday the 13th in 2029. I could imagine if it hit the Earth, because it's bigger than a football stadium, it would cause maybe 3 days of darkness, not an Armageddon or anything like that, but just still unpleasant darkness. And I don't know if that ties into that, but this thing about Spirit telling him 2037, that's the 3 days of darkness, and the pyramid inch in Egypt backing it up. You don't like to give dates, but do you have any comment?
Yeah, I mean, at least connecting with my guides, how I would answer that would be, at the higher dimensions, at higher consciousness, there's no date, there's no time frame, there's no set points. There's node points, which are little bubbles of energy that certain potentials could happen. But to be able to translate that for a higher self or an oversoul consciousness, to be able to translate that to a date seems unlikely to me, because when anyone's channeling or connecting with higher frequencies, that message, that whatever they're getting, their vision, their message, whatever that looks like, still has to run through that individual's filters and screens, and has to run through their own ego, and has to run through their own programming. So it could be, I mean, I don't know. If that's how this individual feels, I'm not going to say he's wrong, but in my experience with how I connect with my guides, there's only potentials for energy shifts. Yeah. Leave it at that.
Fair enough. So let's get on to the next thing here: transformation after the gift of narcissism. Could you also have written transformation after the gifts of sociopath? Because Eric
Yeah.
Doherty, he's done some videos how to deal with narcissists and sociopaths. He says the first thing you got to do is forgive them, because if you don't forgive them, they're going to feed off of the depression and anger that they've caused you, because they're narcissist and sociopath. But if you find it in your willpower and your guts and your consciousness to forgive them, well, they can't feed off that because they're narcissist and sociopath. Therefore, the karma is gonna, at that point, come back to bite him. And Aaron already said there was this lady who should have been fired from this job he worked at. She was never fired. He finally decided, okay, I'm going to forgive this lady, even though I hate her with a passion. I'm going to act like I forgive her, and I'm going to be serious about it too. And next thing you know, the lady finally got fired. So, does that have a tie into what you talk about in any way here, or is this completely different? This transformation after the gift of narcissism?
Right. I mean, after I posted that video, I had hundreds of emails from individuals who shared with me their stories of their abuse. And to anybody who reached out, I mean, I got back with everybody. Thank you for sharing, because what I found was these stories were so similar. I mean, it's almost like there's a narcissist textbook. There's like a course that these people take. And, you know, from things they say to things they do, to how they stand, to how they look at you, to how they move their arms. It's very textbook. And yeah, the only way to really move on and let go is unconditional love, forgiveness, compassion, and understanding. And it's so hard. It is so very hard. And here's the thing that I tell people too: just because, let's say on Monday, you do a meditation and you're blissed out and your heart is open and you feel all of those things. You can look at your narcissist and you can okay, I love them. I thank them for this lesson. I'm grateful for them. I'm such a better person because of them. That might just be on Monday. We shift. We are constantly shifting. I am a million different Amandas in one day. So just because you're in that state on Monday doesn't mean that on Wednesday something's going to happen and you're going to get triggered and you're going to get upset. You're going to shift back and forth all the time. It's not, I don't know that you can ever be 100% healed and moved on and let it go. I don't know if you can. I'm not there yet, but I'm more than 50-50. I'll put it that way. The more you practice and the more that it's all about frequency. It's all about your frequency. So, if you are triggered, if you have a moment where you're triggered, and whatever your practice is, you can shift that frequency, shift to a different consciousness, and remind yourself to be grateful, to be thankful. But it's a process, and it's so if anybody out there is having that issue where one day they're good, they can talk to their narcissist and be friendly, and then the other day they can't deal with it. That's very normal. And the more you practice, the better, the easier it gets to stay in a positive shift when you're around them.
Thank you very much. Down the list here again. Next one is shifting polarity on addiction. This is interesting. It's like you're suggesting that addiction is a polarity issue at some level, and if that's the case, then well, you find the key to shifting that polarity. You stand a good chance of the addiction being gone, even though you didn't maybe it didn't require much effort on your part because you had an easy job just shifting the polarity and that was it. Of course, there are other ways. There's no question that things are more addictive than other things. Take tobacco, for example. I can say from experience that inhaling into your lungs is going to get you addicted to smoking a lot faster than cigar pipe smokers would by not inhaling into their lungs and just dragging it into their mouth. It's not an instant rush like into your lungs is, which is basically the reason why crack cocaine is more addictive than powder cocaine. It all has to do with the inhalation being an instant rush and gratification. But I guess there are keys for shifting polarity to even deal with addictions like that. So how do you shift polarity to deal with addiction? Or is that what this is about really?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a tricky subject too. most LightWorker, StarSeed type individuals have dealt with addiction. If not, I mean, everyone has dealt with some type of addiction, and it's, in my experience, always to fill some type of void. And I think once you figure out what that void is, you know, lack of love or not being worthy of attention, or feeling, I mean, there's so many different issues that there's so many issues that would make an individual feel like I've got to fill this space with something else, or I've got to numb this emotion, or I've got to turn this feeling off somehow. It's you can view addiction as a tool, as a tool from a tool shed, and you get to a level where, and I've talked to so many different people who are at that point where they just want to be done with the addiction, and it's not helping them. For me, I drank for 15 years, and I got to a point spiritually where it wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping me cope. It wasn't giving me that fix that I needed. It wasn't filling the void anymore. And it was just a nuisance. And it becomes at that point more of a routine where, it's just, oh, it's 8:00. It's time to have a beer. Again, it's a frequency issue. So once your consciousness raises and once your frequency raises, you are aware that you don't need a substance to lift you up. You don't need or for me, to bring you down, to numb those feelings. It's just, it's a tool that, and it's okay. If you need that tool, you get to a point spiritually and consciously where you just don't need that tool anymore, and you can shift to a version of yourself that doesn't need that particular tool.
Right, but that begs the question, when does it ever become appropriate to make your life really boring by getting rid of all the tools, but then again, you're not making your life boring because you realize your infinite consciousness potential, so you don't need the tools. I mean, I got all sorts of crystals and gemstones and some incense and things like that around my house here, and I'm planning to buy some plants in the spring that are really good for the things I seek and all that. I even bought some mandarin ducks to help me find my dream girl. And I'm thinking, okay, well, if I realize my infinite consciousness potential, one could make the argument you better get rid of all these things because you're downplaying your infinite consciousness potential by using these tools. But I'm thinking, well, that's kind of a silly way of looking at it. I'm just using these things. Well, they make good tools, but also, even if I did realize my infinite conscious potential, I'm not going to get rid of these things because they make everything look nice, aesthetic, and pretty, and add variety and spice to life. And so I'm assuming you would say never ever chuck a tool that you've moved past. It's good to keep it around for decoration's sake, if you get my drift. But I don't know. Is there like maybe a rule to like deciding when maybe a tool like a crystal or something like that should actually be, dare I say it, thrown away because you're infinite consciousness now and don't need it anymore?
Right. I get what you're saying. Well, that's addiction. I mean, that's what there's gray areas. There's individuals that can have a couple beers and they just like the taste of the beer, and they don't need beer every single night. That's different. That's somebody enjoying beer. Or, if somebody likes a cigar smoke after whatever, a celebration or whatever, that's not really what I'm talking about. It's for me, I had to drink. I had to drink every single night. It put me to sleep. I couldn't sleep without it. It was something that if I didn't have, I was going to get it somehow. It was always in my fridge. It was like air to me. Now, I didn't like that. I didn't like having to depend on that. I would never say that about a crystal. It would never be like, oh, I can't leave my house without my lapis, or whatever. So it's a little different. There's certain lines of addiction, and I'm not. It's self-identifying. If you have something in your life that is causing a disruption, whatever it is, shopping, eating, whatever it is, if you're doing something overly abundantly, and it's causing a disruption and you don't like it and you want to get rid of it, that's kind of what I'm referring to about addiction. Tools as far as whatever that looks like, if it's beneficial for you, if it lifts you up, if it brings your frequency up, if it's something you enjoy, then that's something you should keep around.
Thank you for your advice there. I also need to ask you maybe for a little bit of advice. Funny I say that because earlier I said people need to discover things for themselves, but hey, maybe I don't see why I can't ask this because I remember you mentioned earlier something like you read 300 books in a 365-day period. That's very impressive. I wish I could do that. I mean, I've read books in my life. 3 of David Icke's books, Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. These are some very thick tomes. I managed to read them all, but my little weakness with it is, um, well, it seems like I can only read 10 pages at a time or 30 minutes at most before I got to do something else. I mean, it's kind of, hate to shift the blame on the zodiac, but in Chinese astrology, I'm a fire tiger and I'm also an Aries. When it comes to being able to sit still, that's a recipe for disaster because my signs say I'm not going to be able to do it. So that might explain why I can't really read for such long periods of time without wanting to go do something else. So, and I've actually noticed that my desire to read books has actually waned in the past year, and one part of me is saying that's just the way the stars are aligning. It's nothing to be worried about. It's going to change in the future, but still, I'm not really happy about that because I want to try to keep up reading. And they always say smart people use computers, but genius people read books. Well, I made that up myself. Nobody said that, but you know what I'm trying to say here. So, can you maybe give me a little bit of advice for how to be able to read longer and maybe sit still and be able to read without wanting to do something else and get up and yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, everybody absorbs information differently. It's if books aren't necessarily your thing, I get it. It's hard to sit still. It's funny because I'm dyslexic, and to be very very honest, very out there, I didn't read my first book all the way through till I was in high school. I skimmed words and somehow still got A's and B's, but I didn't read until I got older, and I never enjoyed it. I never liked it. But when this awakening happened to me, it was like I couldn't get enough. I was in that seeker phase where I was a sponge. And this information would just find me. It would, I just be at a bookstore and it'd be some old tattered up David Icke book was one of my first ones that I read. It's just, I needed it. It was something that I needed to be open to, and just absolutely devoured it. But that was how I got the information. It could be that everybody gets information in different ways. Maybe it's a video, or maybe it's a podcast, or it's what you're drawn to. And if it's something that if you're having issues with keeping the attention, then maybe it's not something you really need. Maybe it's not a topic that it's part of that is part of your mission, or is that is part of the intel that you need to share with people. Maybe you just haven't found haven't found that right stream of consciousness yet.
Right, but like I said, part of me is saying this is just the way the universe is at this time period aligning things to be. So just and I'm sure I'll move past it at some point, and we'll be reading as much as I used to be a few years ago. But anyhow, moving on down the list, I see you have something for activation art. Now, my favorite activation art that I've used, and well, unfortunately, I can't seem to use it anymore because she is I apparently made it impossible for people to copy and paste it off her site. Teal Swan,
Mm.
her logos, I use the alchemy one for my YouTube channel and the empowerment one for my Facebook as my Facebook avatar. I feel that the sacred geometry and the messages in those art figures are really worthwhile to make use them frequently and maybe even hang them up in public places if you can do that. Um, but I guess she was losing money by giving them out for free, so she stopped doing that. So, well, it is what it is, and everybody's got to make a living somehow. So I'm not going to blame her. But this activation art that you have on your site, what kind of art do you have? Is it similar to what Teal Swan has, or is it completely different?
I'm to be honest, I'm not real familiar with her art. My art is I started doing a lot of sacred geometry stuff, a lot of sketches, and that unfolded into symbols, and that unfolded into light language. Um, it's funny. All of the women in my family, grandmas and aunts and my mom, they are all amazing artists. And they're, I grew up wanting to be able to draw sunsets and waterfalls and these beautiful portraits that my grandma would do. So I'd watch them do art, and I'd get so upset with myself thinking, well, I'm not an artist because I can't do that type of art. But what I figured out was, we don't necessarily get to pick what we're good at. People that create, however they're creating, it's we're channels, we're just natural channels, and whatever we're supposed to create, that's what we do. And I started with sacred geometry. I found that very easy to come up with patterns and lines, and it was easy for me, so I kept doing that. And including the light language symbols over top of some of the sacred geometry, integrating it into the patterns. Yeah, so that's how I do my work.
Thank you. Oh, getting back to shifting polarity on addiction. One thing I do want to talk about is you mentioned using tools and all that. Another tool, this is a lot of people don't like the idea of calling it a tool. They say it should be used. The word that should be used is crutch, even though it's not a very nice term. They say it's actually more appropriate when you're talking about using substances to enhance spiritual awakening, and of course, when you're using substances to use spiritual awakening, the only ones that would make sense to use would be psychedelics, hallucinogens, be they like LSD, hallucinogenic, or maybe dissociative, like PCP, over-the-counter cough medicine, or some people would even deliriums like Omni muscaria. I've noticed Omni muscaria in more recent times doesn't seem to be as effective. I stopped buying it off the internet a while ago, but I used to buy the Washington State A++ variety. I could consume half an ounce of those, and I would get a much more profound experience than I would like about a year ago if I were to take a full ounce of those Washington State ones. And I asked about it in a channel session. Why is that? Well, what's going on here? There is no tolerance built to this stuff, and I hadn't taken it the months, like at least a month in time periods. So I was wondering what's going on, and she said it's probably just your state of consciousness has raised to such a high level that it's not going to affect you at a psychoactive level as much. But there are people who want to use these things because they believe it's good for enhancing spiritual awakening. However, there is some signs that getting high on sobriety is actually the way we're supposed to do it, especially considering that some entities, including my paternal grandfather on the other side, when a psychic was channeling him, I asked him, "Is there anything I can do to make it possible to communicate with you on the other side, like go to the pharmacy and buy some over-the-counter cough medicine and chug the bottle?" And my grandfather laughed, and then he said, "Well, actually, that would make it harder for me to communicate with you. It's easier for us to communicate with you people when you're sober." So apparently, from that standpoint, getting high in sobriety would be the way for us to expand our consciousness better. But some say that's such a non-artistic way of doing it. Well, okay, what's your take on using the tool of psychoactive substances to as a tool to enhance spirituality, or is it a crutch all the way, no matter what?
Yeah, I wouldn't like I don't like to use the word crutch just because, and I don't see it that way. I mean, maybe I used to, but and I don't think there's any supposed to, again, there's no rules. I really don't believe everybody is an individual and is going to go through their process their own way. And but it is true with the frequency. It is definitely, that's what I was told through my guides when I started really connecting with them, was that it is a frequency thing, and they have to tone it down, so to speak, to be able to connect. Well, we have to raise a little bit to be able to connect. So, but now having said that, it's not an all-in-one. It's not, well, alcohol is going to raise somebody up. It's also going to bring somebody down. Same with any of the other substances, it's not, a set in stone rule that one thing is going to be right for one person, one thing's going to be wrong for another. I do think psychedelics are, or like, what's the other one that everybody, I can't think of it, the herbal one, the DMT, right? So I do think there are absolutely benefits to those, and if an individual is called to that and they resonate with that, then absolutely go for it. Me personally, I'm just naturally a very cerebral person, so I've never really been drawn to a lot of psychedelics. But I think if that's what an individual is resonating with, that's what they need to follow their intuition and go those certain routes.
Okay, you don't seem to say you're not really big on using psychedelics, so you seem to be really big on the color purple or violet, both in the hair and the clothes. And so interesting. I saw a video not that long ago. I think it was on the After School YouTube channel, where they talked about how purple was such a rare color many centuries ago because the dye for it came from a snail, and that snail was extremely rare, and so nobody had access to purple except for the really upper class, not just the politicians, but maybe a few in the somewhere around in their league. But anyhow, the kings and queens and all, and like that. But nowadays it's a lot easier to get violet or purple. I don't really know which color is more pro. Do you prefer to say violet or purple? Purple has more of like a childish connotation to it, like Minnesota Viking type purple. That's not the kind of violet that you prefer. And I'm assuming it's crown chakra kind of stuff. Am I right?
Right, yeah. Purple, violet, indigo. I'm a color person. I love colors. So purple's kind of always been what I've been drawn to. Purple and gold are kind of my favorite colors, but yeah. Purple looks good on me. So
Yes, I like trying to use colors too. Elizabeth Harper, I downloaded her guide on which colors to wear when you want to do what and what colors you shouldn't wear if you're planning to do what. Definitely recommend people look into that. Um, so, what else here do you have on your site? I think I'm going to give you at the end of the show the opportunity to give a sales pitch of your services and what you have in your online store for the rest of this interview. Until that point, I think I'll use your YouTube channel as a little bit of a guide here. And okay, I see you have a one here for cutting etheric cords. It's a meditation activation. Now, interesting thing about this, that one important question I've asked: is it worth it to pay someone like Daniel Teague of Vegas Star Healings to cut cords when all you have to do to get it done for free is ask Archangel Michael to do it. And when I actually interviewed Daniel Scranton and he was channeling the consciousness of Archangel Michael, I asked Archangel Michael, why should anybody pay money to to get a cord cut? from someone who can offer that service on Earth when they could just ask you for free to cut the cord for them. And Archangel Michael's response was some people actually would get a little more comfort and a little more a feeling that it was a genuine healing if someone at a down to earth level um, did it instead of someone like I that's a high consciousness archangel of all the answers for him to give. That's what he said. So, but apparently you seem to have a meditation where you can teach people how to cut the cords themselves without any fee to pay or archangel to call upon. Am I right? Is it how it works?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you do it?
Um, intention. It's just your intention. And yeah, I'll speak to that. It's kind of like there are some people that will pay $200,000 for a car, and that's where their value is. And then there are some people who pay 2,500 for a car, and that's, it's just a different value system, and that's okay. That's whatever you're drawn to. If somebody feels like they need to pay someone else to do that for them, it's a tool, it's a permission slip, and that's the route that they want to go. I I have my meditations are all obviously out there for free, and it just starts with an intention. And that's what I tell every single client I get on the phone, is that there's nothing that I can do for you that you can't do for yourself. It's simply realizing that you are a sovereign being. You don't need to and you don't need anybody's help. It's just having that intention of wanting to heal yourself, seeking it out, searching it out, figuring out, okay, I've got some etheric cords connected to individuals. That meditation was kind of a follow-up to the narcissist video, meaning that, you know, uh, as we're healing three-dimensionally from these experiences with those types of people, there's also a lot of higher aspects or higher dimensional energy or etheric cords that are still connected, and you can dissolve those all on your own. And part of the light language message that's in that video is actually speaking to that higher DNA, and being able to cut and dissolve those connections with those traumatic experiences with those individuals.
Thank you. And looking on your channel here and all these different kinds of meditations and healings and all, I see they all seem to be under 5 minutes. One
Mm-hmm.
can't help but wonder, is that really is that a good or a bad thing? I mean, for people who have lousy attention spans and can't sit still, it seems like a good thing. But then, well, some would say, well, size does matter when it comes to crystals. The big crystals will definitely be more powerful than the small crystals. One could also say that, well, time may be an illusion, but when it comes to making the most of what you're doing, time length does matter. An 8-minute video of something will definitely yield better results than a 5-minute video. For if two people doing each one gave their full and undivided attention to the video, the one that did it for 8 minutes is definitely going to benefit longer. That's the unfortunate reality behind how things work in this matrix. Space and time are illusions, but size and time seem to matter. Well, am I mistaken about this? Is there a reason why you would want to make all these less than 5 minutes?
That's all they need to be. In a particular video, let's say that the light language message is 3.5 minutes long. The information, the download, the activation, the codes in that 3.5 minutes are exponentially expansive, meaning that instead of looking at it like 3.5 minutes, it could be a 400-page book. And I that sounds maybe like an over exaggeration, but it's a frequency thing, it's a dimensional thing. It's a lot of information, and it speaks directly to the DNA. So yeah, there is no such thing as timelines, minutes. it is that code that's coming through. And I do like to keep them short because, again, people don't have a lot of time to watch 30-minute guided meditations. When they do, that's great. And I've got a couple that are longer on there that are also very good and beneficial. But for someone who needs a quick attunement, or is just having a terrible day, and has 10 minutes to get to work, and can pop that in and get realigned, reattuned. That's kind of what the point of the shorter videos is.
Well, if you assert that it can provide all the information in that time period to make it worthwhile, then I definitely shouldn't hold anything against you for making them less than 5 minutes. And as far, if I haven't actually had a chance to look at any of these or listen to them, but aside from the sounds and the frequencies and whatnot that's in the videos, I love the artwork that I'm seeing in the pictures here on the video viewing screen here. All these videos, the images that I'm seeing here, if you were to click on the video, it's not just going to show that image as that exists the whole video. Is that like going to be a moving image that's going to be moving in sync with the way the sound goes in the video? Is that what I would?
Yes. I think about half of them do have visuals that move in like kaleidoscope type images. A couple of them are stills, just because it's very time consuming to make those edited visuals. But yeah, it's visually stimulating, activating, as well as sound.
Thank you, and I can't help but ask about the extent to which you think chakras need to be paid attention to, because I mentioned George Kavaslis a couple times already, and once again I'm going to mention him because I can't help but pick on him whenever the chakra issue comes up, because he's caused a brouhaha of sorts in the spiritual and metaphysical communities with his assertion that the chakra science, yeah, it's interesting, yeah, it's how reality works, but it is not in our best interest to research and think about it, because it was actually implanted as a consciousness suppressing mechanism in conjunction with the fall of Atlantis and Lemuria. And in reality, he asserts it's best to just ignore all the chakras and just go with the heart, soul, essence. You can't go wrong. And my argument to him is, well, more power to you if you can do that and not get bored, but you're missing out on the spice of life that is variety, not getting the other chakras involved. And at the recent event that I was at this past weekend in Orlando, Brad Johnson, who channels during his Adronis channelings, Adronis was also suggesting you get the chakras involved, and I asked him the same thing I am telling you now, and he said the chakra was just the choice I used to, because a lot of people can seem to relate to that, rather than just go with the heart. Well, that's so cliche. Chakras seems to be something that more people would be interested in working with and all. So do you, now that I've told you this, do you think maybe you're going to look into this whole idea of not complicating things with the chakras, or do you want to continue to go with the chakras because it's just fun to do it that way?
Well, I do Reiki as well, and I've, coming across certain clients, chakras, blocked chakras are such a focus of stress and dis-ease, and yeah, I mean, you do have to pay attention, especially when, say an individual comes to me with, middle back pain, or stomach issues, or neck pain, things like that. I absolutely always go to the different chakras and work specifically in those areas. There's most always a blockage. Having said that, individuals that do keep their frequency high and are meditating, they're eating right, they are, they're maybe more naturally high vibed individuals, will have very open and aligned and harmonized chakras. And for those types of individuals, it's not necessary to focus on any individual chakra. And at that point, I would say, yeah, you could just kind of stick with an open heart type meditation and just kind of focus on that space. So yeah, it's really up to the individual, and even somebody who's um, highly connected and highly spiritual could still come across a blockage and an issue, and they may need to revisit some specifics there. So it's just very individual.
Well, thank you very much. And you mentioned this in passing earlier, and I do want to bring it up again because I do see this on one of the short meditation videos. Initiation into the universal torus field, torus structure, and torsion field physics. Um, that's something the powers that be don't want us to know about. There was a science channel. No, actually, I think it was on the Sci-Fi Network, but this is not science fiction by any means. It just aired on that channel back before the 2012 Mayan calendar end date. They were talking about the Mayan calendar significance, and also things about torsion physics, and like stuff pertaining to what Richard Hoagland and 19.5 latitude significance and all was discussed in that documentary. And that documentary got kicked off television, which is designed to brainwash you, not enlighten you. And well, this I think this is torsion physics. And also it's been said the body has a torus field around it. And if that's the case, well, how do we make use of that torus field around the body to heal us and enlighten us and enhance our body, mind, and soul well-being? So can you tell us the who, what, when, where, why, and how of toruses and torsion field physics? Take as long as you need. This is a very important subject, I think, because more people need to hear about this.
Yeah, so the human torus field is our heart space. Now, it's also the earth has her own heart space or her own torus field. Now, the universe has its heart space or torus field, which is the great central sun. Now, you could see that as three separate things, or you could kind of visualize it as, Russian nesting dolls. You've got the big great central sun torus field, then inside of that, you've got, the human Merkaba, this, individual fractaled field. It's separate, but it's also in the same space. It's all the same space. It's all the same now. It's just a fractaled position. So when you're connecting with your own heart chakra, when you're connecting with that, you are also simultaneously connecting with Earth's heart as well as the great central sun. So that is the all and none. That is the 0 point field. We hold this space with us all the time, which is source. So it's we're in it, we're of it, we are it. It's all encompassing.
Yes, very, very interesting, and people don't seem to understand the extent to which it's all, how it's all connected. And you mentioned that, I think you said, you can think of us as a Taurus, the Sun as a Taurus, and the galactic center as the Taurus. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. The thing about the Sun being a Taurus, and also the true nature of this, and well, maybe the center of the galaxy too, because maybe you can help. Dare I say, debunk mainstream science here, because it's come to a lot of people's realization that mainstream science has fed us bull crap and lies, saying the stars are powered by nuclear fusion. They aren't. However, the problem is we can't seem to agree on the general percentage consensus of what they actually are. It seems to be some combination of electricity, magnetism, and possibly even scalar energy. And it also has to, you also have to get the cosmic gate factor in too, because so many people in the contactee community and such talk about how the sun is used as a stargate, of sorts. Well, how exactly is the electricity, the magnetism, and the scalar energy, or whatever the star is made of, um, creating those stargates? And also raises the question of how exactly does a supernova form, and how do black holes form out of stars? Because if the nuclear fusion is wrong, then the theory of how those things work must be wrong. And in the center of the galaxy, well, I'm starting to think now that that whole idea that there's a supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy is also bullcrap and a mainstream science lie. It's not like that at all. It's more of a galactic central sun. Seems to be the metaphysical answer, but what does that look like compared to other suns? You say these things are torus structures, so can you help maybe make sense of this and maybe answer these unanswered questions to some extent?
Well, I would say, I would say, yeah, the idea of, you know, black holes are interesting because, it's kind of like this battery of, positive, negative polarity. Um, is it, I guess it depends on how you look at it, whether it's a black hole or is it actually a creative source field, or is it both? Is that the torus field? And if we are connected with all of that, I've often wondered, growing up as a star seed, looking at stars, looking at what they're calling planets out there, how real is that? How physical are the stars and the planets? And is it just a group collective or a group consciousness that we are actually seeing? Is it just a reflection of some past, future life experience that is just another another consciousness? I'm not sure. I haven't figured out all of those questions either. It's very interesting how gravity holds things together, or how we're told gravity holds things together, and how like frequency is going to kind of collect and orbit and gather towards each other. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how that works.
Neither do I, and I don't know if we'll ever know until we pass away and get all the answers when we're on the other side.
Right.
But we don't want to have to wait that long, so let's do what we can to research it. However, this whole idea what gravity is and all that's um, recently brought up by the whole Thunderbolts project, among other things. David Talbot, the guy who wrote the Saturn Myth, was the guy behind that program. But aside from believing that Saturn used to be a lot closer to the Earth in ancient times, it also talks about how it's really an electrical universe we're living in, and gravity is not what we're led to believe it is. And I, well, then again, for every person that says gravity is blah blah blah, you got another person saying gravity is yada yada yada, and neither of them seem to agree on what. Well, neither of them agree with mainstream science. So, and like the whole thing, also with dimensions and densities, mentioned that earlier. What does the D stand for in your 12D divine golden template? Well, it could stand for either, but it's also complicating and confusing how some people say the difference between dimension and density is this, but others say no, that's not the difference. The difference is that. So I think that kind of proves that nobody actually knows what the difference is. And well, when it comes to understanding the universe, we got a long way to go. Um, but since I mentioned that, Brad Johnson at the conference that I was at, he recently talked about how the universe, as we know it, is not a vacuum, and he even said there is water up there in the cosmos, and even used the Bible as evidence of that. Of all things, talking about in Genesis, it actually says moving through the waters. Well, I've heard the crazy assertion that there's a gigantic ocean of space entities out there swimming through the plasma of space, and it's not a vacuum in that regard. And they claim to have showed images of what what in the image they say is a entity sucking on the sun and siphoning energy off the sun. It's a giant blob-like structure, and well, how can it exist up there? If it's a vacuum, well, it's not a vacuum. And NASA always seems to try to cover this up, but someone gets a hold of it before they do. So that's a good thing and all. But do you does that resonate with you, by the way? That since you're willing to go cosmic with your explanation of things, talk about the sun and like the galactic central part, do you think space in general, it's more of a plasma structure with potentially water up there and not the vacuum we're led to believe it is? That makes sense to you?
Yeah, I again, I'm not sure. My idea of what I thought space was when I was a kid, what I was, told, taught space was, I tend to believe if it was in a textbook, it was probably wrong. So I don't know what it is. It's like anything else. It's consciousness. It's imagination. And, everybody researching these types of things, it almost makes it's so convoluted, because how can you research something that you can't really physically touch or smell or feel? How can you really research those concepts? And it's almost like the more ideas and different understandings that you are throwing out, and everybody's got their own theories. When someone makes an assertion or when somebody has a theory about something, it's a stream of consciousness. It's a root spreading, and the more people you have believing a certain thing, it draws that focus and it draws that attention. It's kind of I don't know. To me, it almost just makes it more complicated, and I've found as I've connected with guides that the more I look out in space and think of cosmic and that sort of thing, I feel like it's more of a bubble, of a thought, of an idea that I'm never, like you said, I'm never really going to totally understand that unless I'm in, deep meditation and I can actually experience it through frequency. I don't know. I don't know that a three-dimensional human is really maybe even meant to understand it and put it into words and draw a picture of it. And, maybe we're not meant to have the math and the physics of it figured out.
Well, thank you for making that clear to all the people out there who try to understand things that they probably won't ever be able to understand. I'm guilty of that myself.
It's frustrating. Yeah.
Indeed. And well, let's talk about a couple of other things. We got about a little 25 minutes to go. Some of the things you offer, sport nutrition specialist. Now, when it comes to sports and nutrition, a lot of controversy behind what's the best way to go about it, and whether or not certain things can be considered cheating. I mean, the whole anabolic steroids, where big boys let us do what we want. No, that's ridiculous because you're cheating when you do that. Says who? Well, I can sort of make the same argument myself. When I was in high school, I did what some could call poor man's steroids. It's not a steroid at all, though. It's creatine. Yes, I took creatine, and that is a non-protein amino acid, and it's really kind of hard to say that it's a performance-enhancing drug because you actually consume creatine every time you eat meat, especially red meat that has the highest amount of creatine. All I was taking was just a concentrated form of something that you can naturally find in meat, and I think it actually did me pretty well. Interestingly, though, there was a lot of stuff on the internet I remember in that time, and there probably is still now, about a lot of people in the forums on creatine out there claiming that creatine is extremely dangerous and that they had multiple emergency room visits because of it. But I can't. Part of me was telling me that those were all lies, And what was going on is that creatine was something like the control system saw as a bit of a nanny state kind of thing. Like they like tobacco with a they try to make a nanny state out of everything in society, telling us how we have to live our lives, and picking on cigarette smokers was one thing, and also picking on creatine users was another. So they probably hired a lot of trolls to demonize it and say bad things about it. Um, I think that's what was going on, and I never had any problems with it. I always made sure to drink tons and tons and tons of water to make sure I didn't get any bad side effects, and had the full effects of it. And I believe it actually did me pretty well. But I don't know if that's the kind of sport nutrition that you specialize in. So, what kind of and is this sport specific nutrition specialist? Like if someone says I'm an athlete for this sport, can you specifically help me with this? Could you help them in that kind of regard?
Sure. Yeah. Well, when I started doing that specific certification, yeah, the nutrition, health, fitness is just very hijacked, very it's big business. It's big business. And what I found working in the gym, I worked in a gym for about 18 months, and there's always a big item that they're pushing. It's super beats one month, and then it's something else another month. And, you know, it's, I'll go back to, it's really individual. You, you have to know your own body, and you have to do a little bit of experimentation on your own body, trying different things, trying different supplements for 4 to 6 weeks. Did it help? Did it not help? Was it worth it? It's nice to have a general overview of how the human body works. However, there's so many different types of human bodies. Not everybody's the same. Everybody has different chemistry, and their bodies metabolize food differently, and certain exercises work differently. And what I tell people that are just beginning, trying to get fit and get healthy, is to really pay attention to your body. Your body will tell you what it needs, what it's lacking, and it'll let you know if certain supplements are not sitting well or not working. The best way to go about sports nutrition is to eat clean, eat lean. Try not to stick to a certain fad diet, or whatever is popping up in the magazines is probably just that. It's probably just marketing. So you've got to do a bit of experimenting on your own body to get the right fit.
Well said on that one. Now, one of the last thing here on this front page of your website, channel for the golden ray. Okay, I don't think this actually did this come up at all in our conversation about how you're a channel for well, you did, I think, mention in passing regarding where you get your information from, like higher consciousness, but I don't think you actually went into the golden ray in any specific detail earlier. So can you? Who exactly are they? What are they? What is it? What level of consciousness are we talking about? How do they interact with us too?
To my understanding, it is 12-dimensional consciousness, or I call them the Council of 12, or the Solar Lords of Light, 12 Solar Lords of Light. I have had some very beautifully blissful, tear-filled experiences, viscerally, physically. I've seen them, I've drawn them. It's a very, very special group. I'm so happy that I get to interact. And this is a group where I channel the light language. This is how I do the light language stuff. And yeah, they're, like I said, they're just a very special group. I connected with a particular being, a golden triangle headed type jellyfish looking tall being back in shortly after the Lionsgate experience I had in Sedona. It was probably 10/10. I believe it was October 10th when I had a very interesting encounter. And that was kind of a merging of consciousness from my understanding. And I say that a lot because my understanding changes as downloads come in, and you know, it's never the same in my head on different days. So from my understanding now, this was a being that is me. It's a higher aspect of me. And when I merged with this entity, I guess my frequency raised and expanded enough to be able to connect with this group, and that's how I started channeling the light language.
Thank you. And you say higher version of yourself. That's also what Brad Johnson said when asked at the conference this past weekend. What Adronis is. It's a higher version of himself, just like Bashar is a higher version of Daryl Anka. Well, okay, the interesting thing here is that just there, is that the only proper way to say it? I mean, is there a reason why he wouldn't be saying Adronis is a higher version of you? Well, that couldn't be, because if it was a higher version of some of the audience, then it would be communicating with Brad Johnson, now would it? So there must be something that makes it true that Adronis would be a part of Brad Johnson, or the Golden Ray is a part of you, and why you're not telling it's a part of you too. No, it's not. It's part of me. That's why they channel me. So I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. How do we make sense of these entities being you, but not
right,
the channel in particular?
So I'll go back to that visual of the triangle. If 8 billion people are at the 3D level, as you go up, there becomes less individualized fractaled souls. So the group that I communicate with, the entity that I communicated with, there could be millions of people out there, hundreds of thousands of people that are connecting with that same energy, with that same field. And there are, in fact, anybody who resonates with the 144,000 code, anybody who hears that and gets goosebumps and feels it in their lower spine and up through their neck, they are connecting with that same consciousness. And the numbers could be, I don't even know. Like I said, millions of people. Now, here's the thing. They may not label it the same. They may not name it the same thing, because again, it has to filter through their lenses, their programming. It might be a different name. It might look different. It might not be 12. It might be 9. It might be 7. It could be a completely different thing to them, but it's the same energy. It's the same frequency. It's the same code, just a different name for it.
Okay, and out of curiosity, have you actually done any tests to see if Golden Ray is genuine? Brad Johnson has said when he was first channeling Adronis, he did go through an effort of sorts to make sure that it was the real thing, and to make sure that he wasn't being sabotaged. And is there maybe if you have, maybe you can tell us any techniques for those that find themselves one day they wake up and the next thing they know an entity is communicating with them and saying, you've reached a level of consciousness where a higher version of you, wants to communicate with you. What can the person do aside from just going within and using discernment? Are there any specific, more complicated techniques if they want to go through trouble to find out it's a real thing, a real entity that's not a fraud?
Right. I never had a feeling or an inkling. There was never a atom photon in my body that told me it wasn't real. When you connect with this type of energy, you just cry. You can't stop the tears. It's a feeling of happiness. It's a feeling of bliss. There's nothing on earth that could ever make me feel and vibrate the way that I do when I connect with this group. It's there's no there's no need to discern. It's such a visceral experience that everything about it is good. There's no question. And I guess that makes me curious, individuals that feel the need to make sure it's not a fraud, maybe they haven't touched this frequency yet, because it's, at least for me, it wasn't anything that I questioned. It was a knowing, it was a resonance that was profound, and there was no question.
Thank you very much. Now, before I give you the chance to do a sales pitch on your services and products, Star Shaman. First of all, what's the shaman part of this? And second of all, when you say star, is there a specific star system, or is it just a general term for stars in general?
Just stars in general. When I started my awakening back 2014, I was very drawn to the Pleiades, the Atlantean line, the Lemurian line. I have shifted a bit in that understanding, because I've also had contact with Andromedan energy, lots of different energies. It's not even my light language. I've noticed there's different scripts, there's different symbols for different star systems. So like I can tell when I'm doing art, a certain language, a certain script will be from a certain place, and I can feel it, I can sense it. So I don't necessarily, many star seeds, if not all star seeds, were from everywhere. We may have a higher resonance with a certain system. We may be drawn to a certain system more so than other ones, but it may just be that we are actively integrating that stream of consciousness at that moment. So I think we shift through different systems that we're drawn to. But the Pleiades was the first one. I'm a Taurus. When I was a kid, I always found the Taurus system. It was the first one in the sky. I could always recognize it. So I guess that would be, maybe that's my most recent stop. I don't know.
Really say Taurus is the one that was easy to notice. I thought Orion would definitely stand out a lot more than Taurus would. It's basically in the sky. It's basically Orion slaying Taurus, but the layout of Orion, I thought that would be a lot more noticeable. But maybe not for you. Maybe something just drawn to that constellation, and I guess the V shape in the horns maybe was something, and the Pleiades too, that would stand out. Stands out to me too, because I have some Pleiad and a lot of Pleiad in me as well. But anyhow, this is about me. This is your chance to shine. So now, without further ado, before I give you the chance to give a quick sales pitch on all your services, the online store. I haven't even looked at this. What do you sell? And go ahead and make a sales pitch.
Oh boy, I'm not a salesman. That's why I didn't make it in the gym. I'm bad at this part of it. I don't know. I do a lot of different services. I just really enjoy helping people. I really enjoy talking with people, and I do a lot of spiritual counseling. People have questions about their awakening, and they're confused and they feel alone, and the response I get the most is, thank you for talking to me, because I don't have anybody else to talk to about this stuff. A lot of people going through this are, they may be in small towns, their family are not experiencing these things, and they don't have anybody to speak to. So I just really enjoy talking with people and sharing what I know and or what I think I know, and sharing the information that I can. My stuff's out there. Anybody who resonates with my energy and who would like to reach out. I do free consults, and I just like connecting with like-minded people. And one thing that my mentor told me early on, when I was just very, very early stages of awakening, I mean, I've always dealt with feeling alone and feeling isolated and withdrawn, and I've always felt like I was just kind of dropped in the middle of the desert, and my spaceship flew away and just left me there. So one of the things I had a lot of struggle with is this feeling of being alone and nobody to talk to. And what she told me was that as my frequency raised, people would just magnetically be drawn to me. People would find me. People would resonate with me. And I didn't believe her. She said people would come out of the woodwork, and I'd make these connections and all of these synchronistic things would happen. And she was right. And it was a slow process, but it started with putting my website up and expanding my Facebook, which I was kind of against at the beginning, but it is true. When you start to speak your truth and you put yourself out there and who you really are, the like-minded folks will find you, and your soul tribe will come together, and it's really beautiful when that happens. So that's my closest sales pitch, I guess, is just I'm just out there to help like-minded folks.
Thank you. And I do want to ask you, though, this just occurred to me. Your website, incorporealhealing.com, spelled like those two words are incorporeal and healing. Well, the first word, it just stood out to me for a moment here because exactly what does that word mean? Because I'm looking in the middle and I'm seeing corpor, and well, that kind of jumps out at you because it's been said that the corporation is the evil force in our time. They make you a corporation with the birth certificate of you at birth, which is supposed to make you a dead person, making it in all caps, symbolic of gravestones, and that is designed to suppress your consciousness at some level. For those that think it's just a patronage myth, well, it's not going to help you in court to know that, but the idea of it happening is really a consciousness suppressing mechanism, is what they're trying to do there by treating you as dead. And so I look at this and I'm thinking, why would you choose the word incorporeal? Is that actually what it comes from? Corporation, corpse, dead, or is it actually no? That's not what it means. I'm totally looking at this the wrong way here.
So when I was a kid, and I wanted to be a rock star, I would try to write song lyrics. So I used to read the dictionary, and I remember when I read the word incorporeal in the dictionary, and it's not an easy word to write in a song, but I found it and it just stuck with me. Not made of matter, not having a physical form. And it stuck with me in such a way that I used to draw it and all this stuff. And when I went to put my website up, I had the template up, and I'm putting all this information in, and it says, well, what's the name going to be? And my mind went totally blank. I'm like, well, I didn't even think about a name. And my guides came in and said, well, you already know the name. And I remember this word, incorporeal. Oh, not made of matter, not having physical form. So it ended up being this word that I learned when I was 14, maybe.
So you actually don't know, and I don't really know myself. It was actually an assumption on my part to think that it comes from the same root as corporation, which implies death because it comes from the word corpse. So is that, may I actually be mistaken here in thinking that that's the connection between you don't know yourself, do you? If it comes from
Um,
corpse, the same root.
I mean, corporeal would just be form. So I guess not having a form, not made of matter.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll not have to go any further than that. All right. So, um, where to go from here? Now, all right. You say you don't really want to, because we've got about 3 minutes left. Now, you say you really don't want to look at dates and all that and time periods and all. However, you can't help but notice that if you look at from an astrological standpoint and how things played out cycles of time wise, you would have to think that if you know where the stars are going to be and what happened throughout history the last time the stars were in these configurations, then you can to some extent create an exception to that. Don't put dates on, not by putting an exact date on, but at the very least you can say by this time period you will see this. And this seems to be the case regarding the fall of the Roman Empire of the modern era, that is the United States of America, which is a corporation masquerading as a government. And the idea is that by the April 8th, 2024 eclipse that crosses America in crisscrossing the path of the eclipse that crossed America back in August of 2017, from a psychosis time standpoint, that's very much in line with the series of eclipses that happened before and after the American Revolution. Um, so you would have to think, okay, if you know that, then you're not going to have egg in your face if you make the proclamation that we're going to see some sort of American Revolution style change in America, because the stars and the cycles of time implications suggest that, well, that's what's got to happen. Am I right, or am I not looking at it the right way? Any comments on this?
Yeah, I think there's definitely, the revolution has been happening. It's been happening for a while. It's been silent and it's more vocal now. And the more people that wake up and the more voices that are heard, the more people that speak their truth. It's inevitable. Things are changing, have been changing, and will continue to change. I think it's a crazy exciting period of time that we've all chosen to witness. And it's very exciting. It's very exciting for sure. I know that I will, in my lifetime, see something grand. When that's going to happen, I don't know. But there's a crescendo, and I think we're approaching it. I think 2020 is going to be a big year for Starseeds and a big year for ever expanding consciousness. I think people need to focus on their own missions and connecting with their higher selves, and just focus on positivity and manifesting the highest good for everybody. And it's going that way. The balance has tipped. Uh, um, yeah, we're there. We're watching it now. So
Well, great. You say you want to focus on positivity. Well, it can't all be that way when you need to expose lies, and this ties in directly. And you mentioned you did listen to the work of David Wilcock, and well, now your research is not really paying attention to him and other people now. It's more communicate with higher consciousness, but you did, and anybody who still does would very well remember that he said, like in, I think it was this past March, something about big data dumps. And then he said something about it again at the end of December. And at the conference I was at this past weekend in Orlando, one of the questions, which was given to the panel of Brad Johnson, Jason Quitt, and John D'Souza was also a speaker there. John D'Souza decided to answer the question. The question was, what is it with us hearing all this stuff about data dumps and stuff being released and nothing is happening here? Why is this being postponed and not released? And the unfortunate answer was, it would be too much of a shock to the system, to the human race, that people would not be able to basically live their life knowing the truth anymore, so they don't really want to like throw it on our face. Well, okay, if that's the attitude you're going to have, then well, you might as well keep us all in a sleep for eternity, because I don't think you're ever going to think humanity can handle the truth, which kind of begs the question, is the only way to the only appropriate way to do this just throw it all out at once, and if humans can't handle it, well, that's their problem. They got no one to blame for themselves for not being able to handle the truth. The longer you keep using this excuse of, I don't think the common people can handle this if I expose it, then well, then God knows how long you're gonna have that attitude and keep exposing things that all of us who are awake know about, but all the people who are asleep don't. So, do you think this is that's a bad attitude on the people that have the opportunity to expose the information in these data dumps and all, to keep using the excuse, I don't think people can handle it, as an excuse to not do it, when we've been hearing that they're going to do it for a couple years now, it seems like.
I don't know if that's even the core of it, because the individuals that are still asleep, they choose to sleep. And, anybody who's actively tried to wake one of these sleepers up knows that the more you try to push something and push their eyes open, the more they turn away. It really is up to them to want to choose to see it. When people are fixed in their own program and their own paradigm, just like what they said in the Matrix, they will fight to the death to preserve that. So it's not necessarily, it is an excuse. I think people, that aren't ready would be shocked and highly traumatized, but a lot of those individuals would just brush it off as, conspiracy theory. And a lot of them do. Most of them are still kind of in that group of, well, that's not real. So yeah, I don't know. That's a hard one. I definitely feel the frustration, and there's a lot of patience involved in this. And I think everybody any truther is wanting this to be done, wanting this to be out. They want this information to be out and in a way be vindicated for their work. But I don't know that it works like that, and it may have to be a slow process. But again, like I said, I think 2020, we're going to see minds opening and eyes opening, and it's going to be an exponential, and it keeps snowballing. It's getting out there, it's spreading, and I think it's just a matter of time.
Yes, and the Year of the Rat is coming too, and I noticed that one of the biggest weaknesses that seems to be common with Years of the Rat is people tend to unfortunately become couch potatoes if they have the potential to be. So that's it's our job to make sure that doesn't happen in this upcoming Year of the Rat, or they're all going to be couch potatoes like that fat rat Templeton from Charlotte's Web, who ate like a pig. And yeah, but anyhow, people, I'm sure, are going to have 2020 hindsight and all, and not be couch potato like Rat in the Year of the Rat. So, all right, I guess we'll bring this interview to an end because we've already cut past the 2 hour point. It was a pleasure having you on. I will upload this by midnight tomorrow at the latest. Got to convert to a compatible format first using Windows Movie Maker, which I'll do right now. So it was a pleasure having you on. Good luck. Keep uploading your channel. I'll certainly check out some of those meditations and all. See if they treat me well and all. I'm sure I'll have an awakening or epiphany or two. Listen to your work. So lovely having you on. Thank you very much. Take a minute to get any last words if you have any, and then I'll bid you good day.
All right. No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity and great conversation. And yeah, happy awakening to everybody out there.
Yeah, happy awakening. Take care now.
All right.
Namaste.
Thank you.